Hey, how's it going, everyone? So this is going to be a pretty quick part, just sort of cleaning up and summarizing what I did to fix the issue in the last part, and then one last tip for how we're going to need to sort of wrap up our baking, and then we're going to be diving right into textures. So this whole baking chapter is really quick, and we're just going to wrap that up right now. So in the last part, we opened this guy up in Substance Painter, and there were some weird issues with it. Now, as you can see, I sorted that out, and it was actually a bit of a weird issue. I couldn't find exactly what it was. Just by Googling it. So I had to try a couple things out, and what it ended up being was when I normally have this and I go to File, Export Selection, sorry, let me just do a normal export selection. By default, the way that I have it set up is I'm doing a, where is it, FBX export. And this is kind of how I do all of my models, FBX, and then I have it set to FBX 2018. That's kind of like the most modern standard way of exporting a mesh. For some reason though, when I was using this format, it looked good in Maya, it looked good in Toolbag, but in Painter all the normals were messed up. So what I did to fix that was I just changed it to OBJ export. Just standard settings, and I just exported to the desktop as a test. And then in Painter, when I imported it, there was none of those weird normal issues. So I'm not exactly sure what that is. It might have been a setting that I had set up in my FBX export, but if it's looking good in Toolbag and it's looking good in Unreal, I'm assuming that it's a Substance issue. Maybe something I have set up in Substance isn't working. Either way, this is a workaround that totally gets the job done, so we can kind of finally see what it looks like with our normals on and everything's looking the way that it should be. We have everything set up, smooth edges, bolts facing in the right direction. So that's the fix for that. That's just I thought I should probably quickly explain how I got around that issue. Everything's looking good from all angles. So this guy is a done bake, but if you remember, we have two more UV sets to go over. I'm not going to go over everything for both of those. So there's just one last thing that I want to show you and explain to you, and that's kind of all the knowledge I can share for baking. So let's make a new scene, file new. I'm going to go 4K in OpenGL like we did in the last one. And I'd already gone out and baked the keys. So let me go find that model. This one worked fine as an FBX, so I'm going to stick with that. FBX typically I just find is a lot easier to work with because it keeps the material IDs in the file itself. So we can go to keys low, open that, and then go to the textures I baked for it. So that's under baked textures, keys, and then all these Photoshop files. We have final AO, ID, normals, and then we have another one called mask, and I'm going to go over this in just a second. But we can bring those in, hit OK. We're not going to save this. This is just a temporary view. And this might take a second to import. It's a lot of high-res stuff. But we have our keys here. And kind of the most important thing that I wanted to talk about, and it's kind of going to wrap up this entire baking section, is what this mask file is and why we need it and how we're going to use it to prep our model for texturing. So if I slap on our normals, might just take a second. I'm going to go through some of my Substance materials and get rid of them just because it seems to be bogging everything down. But our normals turned out good. Everything baked correctly. We have the bolts down here. This stuff is looking nice. We're getting that nice sort of soft dip that I really wanted for the keys, and all of this is looking good. But we have this mask file. Let's take a look at it in Photoshop. So this is what it looks like, zoomed out really far. But if we zoom in, we can see it's all the keys. I can turn on the wireframe, and it's all the keys. And if you're wondering how I got this wireframe, it's really easy to do. We just have to go back into Maya. Let's close this. And I just selected all the keys, and we sort of get our UV view, and I just click this little camera, and it's going to give us this option box to export where we want to. PNG is going to mean that there's a transparent background, so that's what we're looking for. The texture's 4K, so I set it to 4K, and the edge color is just white, so it's easier to work with. So I just exported this and brought it into Photoshop, and this Photoshop is very similar to the thing we went over in the last part, where I was just masking out the bolts and mixing the two groups of bakes, this time just for the keys. But on top of that, I put an entire black background, the wireframe, and then what I did was I went through each of these keys and I said, hey, let's click this key. Where exactly is it on here? Oh, it's down here. And then I checked reference to see what letters and numbers were on there. And in Photoshop, I filled it in white. So that first one, where was it? Down here. So it was an at and 1.5 symbol, or sorry, half symbol. So I went through and did that for all the keys and turned off the wireframe again and exported this as a mask. So for those of you who aren't too familiar with masks, I know I covered it a little bit in the last part, but black means nothing is going to show and white means something is going to show. And we're going to use this mask now to combine it with our bake. So we have our bake right now, and this is important because there's all these other maps that we need for certain things like generators and smart materials and whatnot to work inside a Substance Painter, and we're going to bake these based on our normal map information. The thing is, we kind of want those numbers to be included in that normal map information so that we can get even more detail out of everything that we've already produced. So what we're going to be doing is kind of building upon our normal map inside of Substance Painter, exporting that normal, and then that is going to be our final normal to work with. So let's go ahead and use this mask to add these keys in now. I'm going to add a fill layer, which is going to mean it's just consistent information across the entire thing. So I'm just going to leave it white, or just kind of grayish, whatever it was by default. And what we can do is add a black mask. So that's going to mean none of this information is showing anywhere. It's just, there's nothing, it's all black. But what we can do is right click that black mask, add a fill, and just completely use this texture that we made, this mask, to drive the information. So if I drag that into grayscale, it's going to say, hey, wherever we added white onto those spot in the texture, that's what's going to be our actual custom mask. We don't have to go in and paint anything. We can just rely on this Photoshop file that we made. So if I go back to this actual fill layer, let's go ahead and get the information we want. So we don't want any color, metal, roughness. We just want height and normal. We don't even really need normal. I'm just going to keep it on anyways. And what we can do is if we increase the height, you can see all those letters and stuff that we made previously are starting to poke through. This is also a good point to bring up when you're doing this kind of technique. You can use this for anything, sort of like any part of metal that has something stamped into it. But just be important, or just be careful to notice the important details, like is it pushing out or is it cutting in? Obviously this is stamping out. But another thing is if you notice the letters and numbers are all inverted, and on a typewriter that's actually how it is, because it's stamping back onto the paper. So everything is actually inverted. So little details like that, most people will never catch it, but the people who do catch it are probably the ones that you want actually seeing it, and they do go a long way. So I'd recommend just, when you're doing this step for whatever you're working on, just be really careful, pay attention to exactly how it's set up. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get this exactly how we want to. It is very soft around the edges, and I don't like that. So what we can do is right click the fill and do add levels. Levels is just going to let us sort of crunch the values a little bit more. If I pull this to the right, you can see the edges get a little less blobby. They're a lot sharper. We can mix that with kind of affecting the height a little bit. And that seems pretty good to me, but I want to double check against some reference really quickly. So I'm just opening up my PureF board, and Oh, this is what I meant, by the way. When you export an OBJ, it brings a material file with it. It just doubles the files. It gets a little messy. That's why I don't really like them too much. FBX is just going to keep that all in one place. So, okay. PureRef is just opening on my other screen. Let's take a look at some of these. So yeah, they're definitely not too blobby and they're very sharp. They are raised a decent amount though. So let's kind of get a good, this is a pretty good shot of it. So I'm going to turn the height up a little bit more. And then as for the levels, if I crunch it too hard, some of these things get completely destroyed, so I don't want to do that. I just want to make sure it's not too blobby, because if I turn it off, it looks a bit silly. I mean, we can also go to our fill layer and add filter. I wonder if a sharpen will do anything. Warp, mirror, sharpen. So I'll turn off our levels for a second. Kind of destroys some of the smoothness. But paired with the levels, it kind of works out a little bit better. So maybe I'll do both of those and then lower the height a little bit. Just looking at it from a distance and focusing on some of these thinner parts. Now I do like how the sharpness kind of pops it a little bit, and the levels is just kind of that level seems to be doing a bit of damage actually. Just kind of experiment with it a bit. I think I'm going to be pretty happy with that. So then all we have to do from here is just sort of get our normals out. In order to do that, let's go to, or hit Control-Shift-E to export. And we're just going to make sure we have to export our normals as a DirectX normals. So we can go to configure. I already have some templates set up for OpenGL normals. I wonder if there are any default templates that have OpenGL normals so we can just sort of use, or if we have to make our own. Lens Studio. As you can see, it's using OpenGL normals right now. So let's go ahead and go to Export, Config, let's find Lens Studio. Right here, we can double check, it's going to be normals. A couple other things that we don't really have to worry about. And let's just choose the desktop for now. We're going to want it to be at 4K, hit export. Hit OK. So now on the desktop here, if we load this guy up, yep, so we have our normals, but the difference is if we zoom in, yeah, we have like little keys on them now, which is really nice. Cool. So with that being done, all we have to do is open up our Photoshop file. That is our normals, and just sort of put that over top of it. So when it'll file open. And just like what we did with the frame, I made an entire file for the keys normal final. Let's go ahead and open that up. And then just grab those normals. All right, so I finally got it on top, and as you can see, when I turn this layer on and off, the only difference is these letters are now put into the normal map, and yeah, everything else is the same. So with that being done, we just save, and yeah, everything is prepped for the texturing phase. All we have to do now is go through and do the same sort of process, but for the inside. But there's no new techniques I'm going to be showing for this, so I'm just going to be doing this all off of camera. But other than that, we got 2 out of the 3 already done. All the techniques have been sort of covered, and yeah, hopefully you guys learned everything. Hopefully that all makes sense. This part might be a little bit tricky or complicated if you're not used to it, but it'll probably make a lot more sense once we start texturing and you can see why we set it up that way. But anyways, guys, with that out of the way, that's going to do it for the baking portion of this tutorial. Super quick, like I said, only 2 parts, and this one was a pretty short one. So thank you guys for watching. We're finally diving into texturing, which is going to be the last kind of major part of this tutorial, because rendering we can knock out in like 1 or 2 parts. It'll be pretty quick. So see you guys in texturing. Looking forward to that, and we're going to be wrapping this up super soon. So I'll catch you guys in that part. All right, see ya.